I'm still a bit confused over how I feel about this movie, but after having given myself some time to think about it, here's my review of Straw Dogs, the remake. Rod Lurie, whom I consider to be a competent filmmaker, raised a lot of heat on himself when he talked about remaking this classic that Sam Peckinpah gave us back in the 70s. I myself am a huge fan of the original, and I naturally had my doubts, but I tried to be open to the film. Instead of a backcountry English village, we get the hillbilly Deep South. Instead of David Sumner the mathematician, we get James Marsden playing David as a pretty boy Hollywood screenwriter, with Kate Bosworth as his wife Amy. They go back to Amy's childhood home in the Deep South and move in for a bit. In the process, they hire Charlie and his buddies to repair the barn roof. Charlie was Amy's boyfriend in high school and is played by Alexander Skarsgård in this film. Also rounding off the cast is James Woods playing the brutish drunk from the original, with the daughter who is the town's jailbait. The movie's reasonably well filmed, well scored, and well acted. I would also say it's well written, but maybe that's just because the plot is so closely linked to the original film. David's existence alienates the townspeople, Charlie wants to woo Amy, and Amy grows increasingly annoyed with her husband's lack of action against the bullies. Eventually, the harassment escalates and leads to the violent resolution that we're all aware of, thanks to the trailers that this movie used. There's a few changes to the original film, of course, outside of the obvious setting change. There's a bigger focus on the valued macho attitude of the town. The symbolism is much more in your face. There's a bit of obvious racial hatred by making the one cop in the town into a black war veteran, and there's even issues of religion versus atheists. Not to mention quite a number of CGI deer. The biggest changes this movie makes to the original, however, is that David is the anti-hero, and Amy is purely a victim of the men in her life. The spirit of her domineering father haunts the house of her childhood. Her husband is assuming and condescending, ultimately backing away from confrontations. Her ex-boyfriend still lusts for her and is convinced that she wants him back. Unlike in the original, Amy doesn't really set out to provoke the builders that much. There's only one instance where she completely provokes them, but she provokes them out of spite and contempt towards her husband, and based on all her other scenes, it's a bit out of character for her. She finds Charlie attractive, but unlike in the first film, she doesn't think he's more of a man than her husband. In fact, this version of Straw Dogs basically takes away most of the controversy. Most of the basic points and most of the plot is still in the movie, but the really startling points that Sam Peckinpah made in his film are taken out. We totally root for the main character because he relates to a lot of us completely, and his struggle is not so subtly compared to the Russians' brave fight at Stalingrad. And compared to the original David, he's mostly a reasonable and decent guy. Because the thing about David in the original is that he's immensely unlikable. The way his cold provocation of the villagers causes discontent, even as he's pushed to reveal just how much of a violent man he really is. The original film had the balls to rise above a simple good versus evil story. This movie does not. In all honesty, this movie is exactly what the original was criticizing. The original showed David's slow but sure emergence to violence with straight, stark imagery, portraying him far from a gallant hero or an underdog. And there's no real use of cinematography tricks or playing the scenes up for thrills. This version makes the violence almost exciting. When David ironically plays music in the original, it contrasts with the brutality, while in the remake it seems only fitting that he would play it, and his enemies even pause and admirably comment on his being a man after all. All in all, Straw Dogs the Remake is an okay thriller, but with very confused messages. It wants to be like the original, yet it refuses to go as far as the original did. It looks down on the society obsessed with macho ability, yet glorifies David's descent into such savagery. This is something that the original, despite any flaws it might have had, was smart enough not to do.